There's a lot of advice I wish I could give my younger self. But if I could only share one piece of advice, just one thing that would completely transform the trajectory of my life, this is what I'd say. And I'm going to share it with you today. I'm Ryan Sahlberg, a retired Marine Corps officer. I grew up with two boomer teacher parents, and while I had a great upbringing, I didn't get very much practical life advice, especially about money. I had to learn everything the hard way, through mistakes that cost me years of potential wealth building. So what I'm about to share with you isn't just theory. It's what I lived through and what I got wrong, and what I desperately wish somebody would have told me when I was in my 20s. Now, before we dive in, let me be clear. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. What I'm sharing with you is what I would have done differently if I knew better. You should do your own research and talk to qualified professionals before making any financial decisions. So let's dive in. So if there was one thing I could tell my 20-year-old self, it would be this. Don't let your money waste away. Let me explain what I mean. Growing up, I heard the same advice over and over. Save your money. That was it. Just save your money. Save for something you want to buy. Build up a reserve savings account. And there's nothing wrong with that advice on the surface. But here's what nobody told me. Saving alone is losing. I should have been making my money work for me. I should have invested in sound assets. I should have done anything other than spend it or just let it sit in a savings account. I saved some money in a retirement plan called a TSP, which is the military version of a 401k. But I barely contributed to anything. And outside of that, I had zero investments. That was a massive mistake. So even before you can think about investing, you have to stop spending your money on garbage that you don't need. And I know this sounds self-explanatory, but you'd be surprised at how many people skip this fundamental step. You can't build wealth if you're constantly hemorrhaging cash on impulse buys, subscriptions you don't use, or trying to keep up with what everyone else is buying. So get control of your spending first, and that's the foundation. So if I could go back and be 20 years old again, here is exactly what I would do with my money. First, I would invest in solid, proven assets. Gold, silver, good stock index funds, real estate. And yeah, if Bitcoin existed back then, I would have invested in that too. Coin wasn't around when I was 20, but the principle still stands. Invest in assets that have a good track record or serious potential. Now, I'm going to be doing a whole separate video on real estate investing, so I won't get into that too much. So let me just say this. Real estate is one of the best wealth building tools available. Whether it's rental properties or house flipping, there are great tax benefits with owning real estate. So here's how I would structure it. I would keep as little money as possible in my checking account just to cover bills and expenses. Then I would set up a reserve fund and a money market account or something similar that's safe and earns interest. After that, I'd look at higher risk investments with bigger upside potential. We'll get into risk in a minute, but that's the basic framework. So here's the thing a lot of people don't realize. Your typical savings account pays almost no interest whatsoever. The average savings account your bank is pushing on you probably pays less than 1%. For example, my USAA savings account, it pays 0.1% in interest. That is laughable. Even 1% will not keep up with inflation, not even close. So right now, according to the official CPI data, inflation is about 2.7% year over year. So your money lost about 3% of its value in that time. But here's the kicker. The CPI numbers are widely considered to underreport actual inflation. Real world inflation, the kind you feel in your grocery store bills or your rent payments, that is much higher. Some independent analyses suggest real inflation is closer to 7 or 8%. One good source is shadowgovernmentstatistics.com. They measure inflation using the old system from the 1980s, which more accurately measured inflation. So if your money is sitting in a savings account earning less than 1% and inflation is 7%, you're losing 6% of your purchasing power every single year. That's not saving. That's bleeding money in slow motion. Now, there are also high yield savings accounts. I have one of those too. And yes, they're better than traditional savings accounts, but they're still not great. Right now, my high yield savings account pays about 3.3%. Now, that's not terrible, but still, it's barely keeping pace with inflation. And it's definitely not keeping up with real world inflation. The uncomfortable truth is this: the Federal Reserve has created a system where you are forced to invest your money just to maintain purchasing power. If you don't invest, you fall behind. That's the game they're playing. Now, I am not a fan of the stock market. Too much manipulation, too much volatility driven by forces beyond our control. But if you want to at least keep up with inflation, there are several solid index funds you can invest in. An index fund tracks a broad market index like the S&P 500. You're not betting on individual companies. You're betting on the overall economy. Historically, these index funds have returned about 10% annually over the years. Index funds are boring. They're not sexy, but they work. But like everything else, there's still risk involved. All right, next let's talk about gold and silver. So the long-term store of value that I'm a bigger believer in is gold and silver. They've been a store of value for thousands of years. And they're always going to go up as more dollars are printed. Yes, there's volatility in the short term. Gold can swing up or down any given year. But zoom out. Since 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created, gold has increased by over 5,000%. It's preserved wealth through wars, depressions, and every financial crisis in between. Silver follows a similar pattern. Both metals are hedges against inflation and economic uncertainty. I would have invested in gold and silver in my 20s if I could do it all over. Physical gold and silver, not paper certificates. If you don't physically hold gold and silver, then you don't really have it. So the overarching principle is this: keep your money working for you or earning. Don't let it sit idle. Money that isn't growing is shrinking. So here's something I wish I really had understood when I was younger. When you're in your early 20s, you should be taking a lot more risk with your money. I would have been far more aggressive with my investments. Now, let me be very clear by what I mean about risk. I don't mean go to a casino and bet it all on black. I don't mean betting on next year's Super Bowl. I don't mean throwing money at some get-rich-quick scheme or cryptocurrency pump and dumps. What I mean is investing in startup companies or newer companies that have sound fundamentals, but a lot of room for growth. Companies with real products, real revenue, real business models, but that are still in their early stages. So think about this. If you had invested $10,000 in Amazon in 1997, that investment would be worth over $20 million today. That's not a typo. $20 million from a $10,000 investment. Or Apple. If you had invested $10,000 when Apple went public in 1980, you'd have over $17 million today. These weren't lottery tickets. They were real companies with real products and visionary leadership. They were risky, yes, but the fundamentals were there. Now, I'm not saying you're going to find the next Amazon, but the point is this. When you're young, you can afford to take calculated risks on companies with serious upside potential. You have time to recover if things don't work out. You have time to learn. You have time to rebuild. So let's talk about risk more broadly, because this is where people get paralyzed. There is always risk involved with money and investing. Always. But here's what people don't realize. Even keeping your money under a mattress is risky. Your cash loses value every single day due to inflation. $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. That's not just a saying, that's economic reality. And not that it's going to happen anytime soon, but if the dollar lost its reserve currency status tomorrow, your money wouldn't be worth the paper it's printed on. So the question isn't whether you'll take on risk. The question is what kind of risk you're willing to accept. If you're young, you can afford to take more risk. If you're 20 and you lose money on an investment, you have decades to make it back. You can recover, you can pivot, you can learn and try again. But if you're 70 or 80 and risk everything on a bad investment, that could wipe you out for good. You don't have time to rebuild. At 20 years old, I had my whole life ahead of me. I could have taken calculated risk with my money. The worst case scenario, I lose some cash that I probably would have spent at the bar anyways. The best case scenario, I build serious wealth over time. Don't be reckless, but don't be paralyzed by fear either. The biggest risk is doing nothing. So here's my last point, and it's a big one. I would have used my money to start some sort of business. Anything, even if it was just a side hustle. Working for yourself is the ultimate dream. Building something that's yours, that you control, that can generate income independently of a paycheck. That's freedom. And again, when you're young, you can take that risk. If you're in your 20s and your business fails, you can start over. You can go back and live with your parents if you need to. There's no shame in failure. It's more honorable to try and fail than to spend your life working for a faceless corporation that doesn't care about you. Steve Jobs started Apple out of his parents' garage. That's a fact. It's okay to use the support network when you're getting started. That's what it's there for. So whether it's freelancing, e-commerce, creating content, or selling a service, there's never been a better time to start something on your own. The internet has lowered the barriers to entry for almost every type of business imaginable. So here's the bottom line. Don't waste your money and grow your money. If I had just put $50, $100, or even $20 a week into some sort of investment, I would have so much more wealth today. The power of compound growth is real. Even small amounts invested consistently over time turn into significant money. I didn't have anyone to tell me this when I was a teenager or in my early 20s. The only advice I got was to save my money and do well in school so I could get a good job. That's it. Nobody talked to me about investing, asset allocation, or financial independence, or starting a business. So don't make the same mistakes that I did. So if this advice resonates with you, share it with someone in their 20s who needs to hear it. And if you found this valuable, hit the like button and subscribe. I put out new content every week. And remember, your 20s are when you lay the foundation for the rest of your life. Don't let your money waste away. Make it work for you. Start today. Thanks for watching.